Welcome back to today's episode. It's March 21st. You're listening to the podcast where we discuss the most recent installments of a different series every show. Adolescence is a Netflix 4-hour miniseries which reached #1 on the global charts for the last week. It was created by Stephen Graham and writer Jack Thorne. Either of those names pop out to you?
Well, Stephen Graham is in the show.
Stephen Graham is in the show. He was also in Peaky Blinders, right?
Yep, and he was Mulligan in Venom, in the Venom movies. Aside from that, I don't think I've seen him in anything.
He was in Boiling Point. He was supposed to be in one of the shows that we did earlier this year, but he didn't show up in the pilot of it. Sorry, last year. Do you remember what show that was? Bodies? Was it Bodies, Bodies, Bodies? No, that's the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he shows up in a lot of British stuff. He had this idea because he'd been reading a lot about, the manosphere out there.
Right.
Kids who are acting out and following the Andrew Tate podcast.
Andrew Tate had a shout out in the second episode.
He does, but it wasn't specifically just about Andrew Tate, but just in general about the incel culture and how teens are responding to it and stuff like that. He'd read some pretty traumatic stories and he thought, how can I reimagine this into a television show that also does it right? That isn't just inauthentic or too, cliche or corny. And so he then brought in Jack Thorne. And Jack Thorne, back in the day when I would watch Skins, I'd always use the fact that this is the original Skins, the BBC or whatever version, Channel 4
Not the
version.
U.S. version.
Yes, but he actually did write for both of them. He wrote one episode in the U.S. version. But Jack Thorne was one of the writers, and at the time I would congratulate them for hiring a bunch of 20-year-olds or 18-year-olds to actually do the writing, people who were the age of the kids or had been very recently. And that's why I thought that the show did so well, because it spoke to the youth better than a lot of even teen shows today. Maybe I should have given more credit just to the fact that they hired good writers, because Jack Thorne, who was older at that time, then being one of those early 20-year-old people, he penned the Effie episode in the first season and also the Chris episode in the first season. Two of the stronger
those are
ones.
those are some of the best ones.
He also went on to do This Is England, all of those types of things, which of course Stephen Graham was a main character in that, kind of kicked off his career. And so both of them together he created this 4-hour thing. They brought in a pretty famous director. The guy who did Boiling Point was Stephen Graham, and he in Boiling Point was shot, I think, in a one-shot take as well, or form as well. And
I was going to ask, because it seems like the one-shot take episodes nowadays are starting to become more and more frequent.
Yeah, even the Seth Rogen show that's about to come out, a lot of the articles were talking about how that is also in a one-shot take mode. One of them, or at least parts of the episodes are, and then there's one episode that's called The Oneer, and that one's fully in it. But this does it in a way where it's less about just doing it for the sake of doing it, and more, I would say, because it's actually aiding the storytelling.
I was going to comment on that. Yeah, so when I think about one-shot take episodes that did it right, I think about Mr. Robot, Haunting at Hill House, even movies like 1917. However, sometimes it feels like it's cheap gimmick. I remember we reviewed Bargain back in 2023, and those were 6 episodes, and they were all one shot, but it didn't really feel like it was necessary. It didn't really actually feel like it was helping the show too much. And even in some cases where
Remind me, what was Bargain?
Bargain was the South Korean show, I think, that all took place in an apartment. It was a show that
we watched all 6 of them?
No. We just did the pilot for it. But I'm saying that all 6 for that season were supposed to be one shot.
Right.
And even in my favorite episode, The Bear, in the first season was one shot, but that was only 19 minutes. The difference here is that not only does the one shot, for the 4 episodes, make it more engrossing, but they're almost all close to an hour long. It is like a 4-hour movie in that way.
And how do you think they did that? Because a lot of the times they do the one shot takes, there's a lot of clever dynamics where they do take several takes of a different thing. Not here. They never stopped recording. So how do you think they managed to get everybody to do the right things, especially when you're talking about drone shots in the second episode, or moving from, in the first episode, the police car from his house all the way to the police station? What do you think they practiced? How do you think they practiced?
I mean, did they obviously blocking, but did they speed it up at any point, or did they?
No. There were no real tricks to it at all. It was really about practice. And so they would rehearse for weeks, and then they would do 10 versions of it, 2 each day.
Wow.
And then they would choose the best take. And a lot of the time, at least with the last, or I think the third episode, they ended up going with the very last take of
Oh, wow.
the
Okay,
entire thing.
that's
So it's like a play.
that's very interesting to me because The Bear, I remember for that one shot taken the first season, they did it as well. But like I said, that was 20 minutes. But you're saying that even for like episode one, which I think is close to like an hour five, they did that 10 times?
Yes. So they would
Wow.
just do it over and over and over. And obviously, with the rehearsal, everybody got used to improvising if they needed to pick up on someone's mistake. And so, for instance, when the kid yawned in the third episode, that was just because he was tired
Yeah.
because he had done it so long. And so when she asked, like, "Am I
Am I
boring you?"
boring you? Yeah, that was
Yes,
at the very beginning.
completely improv. So for anybody who hasn't seen the show, I, like every other article that we've read in this thing, would probably recommend just going and watching it yourself. Other than that, though, it's a fairly simple premise. You have a kid, right?
Yeah, Jamie Miller.
And he is accused of,
A murder shocking his family, and
and
then
by the end of the first episode, we find out that he,
actually he did it.
yes,
The
like,
CCTV footage.
yeah, unless we're going to go in some AI reality thing, which he does try to like kind of promote that message for a second. Is like, you can't trust what it's fake news, that type of thing. But no one's buying it. And by the course of the next three episodes, it's less about if he did it and why he did it, right?
Right. So the first episode ends, and Jamie is speaking with his dad, Eddie, and like he's saying, like the last few seconds are him saying, "I didn't do it," even though we just saw the CCTV footage. So
And
I
is it
was
that he's
thinking.
in such denial about it, or just that, like,
I was thinking the show might have some like crazy twist to it, even though it seemed like it was grounded in reality. But by the end of the season, like especially when you get to the finale, you realize, oh no, he was just trying to tell himself that because he didn't want to admit that he actually did kill her.
this isn't Lincoln Burrows in Prison Break season one,
Yeah,
where he's
right.
accused of killing the vice president. They have it on tape, and then you find out that they digitally like re-enhanced it,
Right.
which is crazy to think that they were doing that plot line in the mid 2000s when it's so doable now. But no, the cops have gotten it right. It seems like it's more about getting the kid to admit it to himself.
Right.
And so in the second episode, the cops want to find out exactly why it happened. So you don't even deal with Jamie. You don't even deal with his dad. You deal with,
You deal with Detective Luke Bascom. And so every episode takes place primarily in one location and follows a different character as the main character. We said in the first episode was the police precinct. In the second episode, it is a school. And
yeah, there's a school. And then the third episode is,
a therapy room in prison, and then the fourth episode kind of has two locations, but it's the Miller's house and a department store for a little while.
all right. So in the second episode, I think the school one is probably the most impressive as far as them having to move around and stuff. They had the assistant directors dressed up as police officers. That might have also been in the first episode too, come to think about it, just so that they could direct like who should be moving when, and still if they're caught on camera, then it looks normal.
And it was funny because Luke Bascom, as we said in the second episode, is the main character. I thought he was going to be the main character for the full series, but the second episode afterwards, he's done.
Right.
He's not there
So
anymore.
it's not like anybody's greedy in front of the camera. Nobody's getting first dibs. And so that guy actually was in Missing You. He was he was the character that had disappeared many years
Oh,
previously to the girl. And yeah, it wasn't as good a show, but it's him and his partner, and his partner's name is,
I don't know her
oh,
name.
Misha Frank, I believe. And she's a little bit more, I guess, salty at the premise of having to go to his school and figure out what's happened.
Right.
She is more upset about the victim and saying, why aren't we concentrating more on her and what pain her family's going through rather than trying to find a motive here? Because we have him dead to rights,
Right.
except for the murder weapon, we have him dead to rights.
And Jade is someone that attends the school. She's mad that Katie, because she was friends with Katie, the person being murdered, was killed, and she thinks that Ryan has something to do with it, even going so far as punching him in the second episode when there's like a fire alarm.
So Ryan is one of Jamie's friends.
Yes.
Okay. And so they interview everybody at the school. Ryan, is he the cagey one?
Yeah, Ryan is the one that at the end, like when
Yeah,
that whole
when they go
chase
to
scene.
interrogate him, yeah, that's where he runs away, and then they find out that he actually provided the knife, not knowing that it was going to be used as a murder weapon.
Right, and that led to his arrest. Also, we got a little bit of backstory as to what Katie and Jamie's relationship was like. Katie was calling him an incel online.
Yes, but not directly. Like, she was doing it in the way that I guess it's more common in teens nowadays, where it's done through emojis and it's like ultra sarcastic remarks, like nice comments that are just so passive aggressive that everybody understands what they mean.
Right.
And it takes his son, who conveniently goes there, Adam, right, to kind of break it down to his dad. And that was a very interesting scene, don't you think? Like,
Yeah,
there's
it
obviously some tension between their relationship just because the dad isn't around as much as the kid would want. But you almost see that repaired by the end because he's taking him out to lunch.
It felt like when he was discussing the hearts, that was the lightest that the show ever got, because there's definitely like a gravitas tone to this whole series for throughout the 4 episodes. But that seemed like something that you would see in, like, I don't know, Stranger Things or something if it were to take place nowadays, where he's describing the color of the hearts meaning something different.
Yeah, that's how he was able to finally break that translation gap because the dad was like, I am seeing this, but I'm not understanding what you mean. He's like, how do you send something to mom? And he's like, the red heart. And it's like, but every heart color has a different meaning. So how real is that? There was an online like debate going on because some people were like, this is the most authentic, real version I've seen. I've even taught in schools like this. And it's definitely, I think, shot from a parent or older person's perspective looking in on that
A
culture.
lot of the kids.
But then there was a lot of arguments saying this is nothing like schools are. And so I think a lot of it has to do with it's a British series. So
Right.
you've got the UK-ness is a little different. Also, where the school's at. I did think the worst that it got was when the cop came in and his son is there. And then one of the bullies starts making fun of the son right in front of the cop. That seemed a little ridiculous. But to me, like, it might happen.
All the kids were, it seemed like at some point, like they were acting out. And it wasn't just because I felt like the
Yeah.
cops were there. I did feel like it was a little bit against like the youth, I guess, in school, because it seemed like they were all at one point doing something bad.
But I wouldn't be surprised to hear that there are some schools that are like that, just because I didn't go to one where kids were I've heard that post-pandemic, like a lot of places where teachers just don't want to teach anymore because of the way that kids act. So do you think the kids overall, though, are good?
I thought that Jamie Miller, and I believe his name is Owen Cooper, I think that's the actor's name, was amazing in
Yeah.
this.
No, I meant the kids as in, like, at that school in that second
Oh,
episode.
yeah.
The cool thing was for Jamie Miller, there was a lot of people who, tuned in to try out for his part. They went around to a lot of high schools and stuff and tried to get new people. I don't think any of the kids were played by anybody who had ever done anything before, including Owen Cooper. And so, and he's already been cast in his next role with Margot Robbie in Wuthering Heights, which is
What
crazy.
a step up.
Well, I think that this is a pretty
Well,
big
I'm
step.
saying I'm saying that, like, if this is like his breakout role and you're saying it's his first role.
Yes,
So,
but all the kids who didn't get a part, as Jamie were able to be extras as background characters in the school.
oh, that's cool.
It is
Yeah.
cool, isn't it? So back to the question though, is the school representative, do you think, well enough in that second episode that you were not taken out of reality, that you were able to follow these cops and think, okay, I believe that this would happen this way?
Yeah, yeah. Even the scene where it seemed like Luke was having to track down Ryan, even that chase scene, I thought like it didn't break my suspension of disbelief at any point.
Yeah, especially since he was out of breath by the end, and then they grow to learn that he was being bullied, that Jamie was being bullied. They have the motive. At the very end, I think that amazing drone shot where it just like launches up, and the way they did it was they had the person who was filming catch it on the other side and immediately turn it towards Stephen Graham, to show his response as he's putting flowers on the gravesite for Katie, because he obviously realizes that his son has done this.
So that was the thing. The show to me always kind of had like a Sherlock aspect where it's like Sherlock around the hour mark always kind of made me lose interest. My interest did kind of wane with these episodes, but there was always something about the endings that brought me right back to it. Like in episode 1, you have the twist because you don't think Jamie did it for a lot of the time with the CCTV footage. With the second episode, you get that really cool drone shot, and it was like that was probably the most technical, especially for a show like this. I thought like that they did well. And so it always was like, even though there was so much that they would throw at you, I would sometimes get lost with the information and I wouldn't be able to keep up as much. There was always something that brought me back into it.
What was your favorite episode?
I would say probably episode 3.
Yeah. because
Yep.
that's where we're going right now. And this is probably, I think, everyone's favorite episode just because of how well they were. I don't even have to ask about how representative it is. When I was listening to the way that they wrote the psychologist character, the way she kept on not making the questions about her, but about how he felt,
Yeah.
and just was able to maneuver no matter how intimidating a 13-year-old got. But he did get upset with her and yell at her. And it was
He was
just
scary. He was
right.
genuinely scary, yeah.
And to have to shoot that 10 times,
And not only that, but to have Jamie, there's just different parts where he's willing to let information slide, even stuff that's kind of traumatic to him, and then there's parts where he is just so not wanting to answer the questions that he's fighting back. I thought that that was the most genuine that the
right.
show.
And it's like it was like a play. Like this
Yeah.
was definitely the part of like the 12 Angry Men where it was just a back and forth between the two of them. It was its own chess match. And so she's really able to break him down, even though her main intent was just to get, I guess, what is it? Something for the courtroom, right? So
Yeah.
something to tell the judge whether or not, not that he's insane or not, but whether or not he understands what he's doing, that type of
So my question, I guess, that I had for the ending was more because she says to him, especially after he finally confesses in a really poignant scene that he did kill her, but he didn't rape her, and he wants like some type of, I guess, like
most kids would have
of war,
thought
yeah,
all.
and I was bearing that. I thought that that was just an amazing scene, but she says it's the last time that we're going to be meeting, and my question was that always the case? Like, was their end of session supposed to be at that point, or was it just because Jamie finally confessed to it that she was like, "That's what I've been trying to do the whole time. I don't need to keep meeting with him."
It's a good question. I would think that it was probably already going to be the last time that they were meeting. This is the time doesn't really matter as far as like the distance between episode 1, 2, and 3 or 4. It's jumping, I think, months. But we're just seeing like these flashes of what's really important. And this was a moment where she was able to break through. And he doesn't do the classic like, "Oh, I feel so guilty," and stuff. He goes immediately back to, "I didn't do it. I didn't do it,"
Right.
like, and so it is very much the most representative, I think, of showing a 13-year-old's mind when how undeveloped it is.
I was gonna say it's kind of brilliant because Jamie throughout the 3 episodes, especially just from what we see of him, I don't know if he's an incel, but I also don't know if he's not. Like, I don't know if he's not listening to Andrew Tate or if it's
Well,
just the fact that he's
every kid at
13.
13, you can't.
It's the whole entire premise, I guess, of when he was saying that he wants some type of credit for not doing something even worse than what he did, where I was like, I was, trying to figure it out, scope it out in that
I
way.
don't think it's even about whether or not he's an incel, because again, at 13 years old, it's very hard to call anyone that,
I
but
don't mean I didn't mean insult. What I meant was if he was actually, like, listening kinda to those manosphere things, or if it was just the
right.
fact that he was young enough where he thought that way.
From what I've read in interviews, they weren't targeting any one specific. Yes, they mentioned Andrew Tate and stuff. So, but I agree with you. I don't think he was like in there just indoctrinated, listening back and forth to like these crazy people. But I think what they're trying to say is that it's permeated youth culture in a way where you don't have to be ingrained in it to completely understand it and feel pressured by it. And so I think he was absolutely pressured. And the biggest question that like really, really was he thinks he's ugly.
Yes.
Like, and
Right.
and so that form of bullying was like he was already upset with the world, upset with himself, insecure to the max. By the end, he was begging her basically to say that he either wasn't ugly or that she liked him in any way, not sexually, but like as just a good
It
person.
reminded me so much, even though I know they're completely separate shows, but BoJack Horseman, the penultimate episode of the first season when he goes to Diane, and he basically is asking the same thing where he's like, "I need you to tell me that you like me."
Yeah, but in this level, it's so much more gross,
Yes.
and like it just shows that his support group, even though he had good parents, and that's another direction the show did was like unlike blaming the parents or showing because they tried to,
Yeah.
they kept on asking how your dad acted and stuff like that, and definitely, what's the dad's character's name?
Eddie.
Eddie's character is supposed to take it personally. It's not like they were treating him poorly. They weren't raising him in the wrong way. It just it happened because of just the elements of the world and also where this kid was in his life, in his mind, and just the mistakes that he made. So there's just so many different factors coming into such a simple plot and premise that the third episode, I think, yeah, by far, if you don't watch any of the other ones, go back and watch that one, even if you know what everything's talking about.
And episode 4 kind of, it goes through that. It goes through a day of the life of the parents. It's Eddie's 50th birthday, and the Millers try to find normalcy for the first half of the episode.
Wait, so it's like 50th birthday, like Breaking Bad.
Yeah, but there's a massive elephant in the room with Jamie. However, Jamie's not even mentioned until midway through the episode. But they do talk about what you're talking about. They're like, are we good parents? We ended up raising Jamie this way. And they even admit to themselves by the end of the show that they probably could have done more. But they also are looking at their daughter and thinking she ended up turning out right, you know.
Mhm.
A big reason for that, though, is that the van is vandalized with the word nonce. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm not really sure. I couldn't even get really a good definition as to what it meant. But anyways, tensions rise and Jamie calls to reveal he will plead guilty. So that was
So you don't see the steps that led to that decision for him.
well, I think episode 3 was supposed to kind of be that like
But this didn't
stepping stone.
happen right after episode 3, right? Like, it must have just finally sunk in over time. Who knows how it got
Right.
there?
His trial hasn't happened yet. He says that it's closing in. And then when he's on a call with his family that are all in the car, he says, you know what? I think I'm just going to plead guilty because
Wait, does
that
he say
seems
it
like
that cavalierly, like he's not even meaning it, or was it one of
he
those?
was afraid to say it to Eddie originally, but
Oh,
then
yeah.
he kind of just lets it out. And that was really the final moments. And then we see Eddie kind of just break down for the rest of the episode. He's so like distraught over the news.
I wonder, like, in that situation, how much time they'd actually get. Because yes, he would spend the rest of, I would say, until his 18 years in their former juvie.
Right, but he doesn't get the death sentence, right? Because
Of
he's a
course
teen.
not. No,
Yeah,
no, no.
so he's a teenager. So that was one of my questions I had as well. But really, that phone call where he says he's going to plead guilty is that's the final scene we get with Eddie, and you don't even see him. Or sorry, with
It
Jamie, and
was
you
a
don't even
first
see him.
degree murder, though. And again, they do things differently there. So I would just be curious. Were you satisfied with that ending, with him going to jail and then his dad just being sad?
I was, but I can easily see why people wouldn't be
I didn't see
because
anybody who wasn't.
well, the thing is that the show has so many lingering questions to it. You just don't know what's going to happen beyond the initial explanation of everything. It just seems like that you're not going to get much more than that.
There's
Like,
nothing there's nothing, that I think the show offered that it didn't let you kind of work out in your own head. Like, is her friend going to get over the fact that Katie died? Probably over time life will move on. This was presented in a way where, like, the cops knew what they were doing. They knew how to handle the situation, even though it was unorthodox. And it wasn't the end of the world, even though it was the end of a lot of, like, the family's just immediate, like, idea of how their family would work and
and it's
how
not.
happy they
I
were.
mean, I don't see how anyone could not think how like sad it was those final moments in episode 4 when Eddie is like tucking the teddy bear into
Mhm.
bed because he's putting it in place of Jamie.
Right. In the first scene, you're seeing this kid get arrested and peeing his pants, and that's how young he is. And then he's still very young, and now he's going to be spending up until his adulthood into in a prison system or a jail system. And so yeah, that's the ending for you. And overall, who do you think did the best job performance wise? The kid?
I think the kid did, yeah. Second to Stephen Graham, but again, the acting in this, I think,
Second to see Stephen Graham, like
yes,
Stephen Graham first?
yeah, or sorry, I would say Stephen Graham was second, but I
Okay.
think the acting just overall was phenomenal on the
Was he even
series.
in that much of the 4th episode? Because I saw him a good.
He's the main character of the 4th
Okay, alright.
episode.
And so
Yeah.
that would explain it. So he's taking 2 episodes while everybody else sorta took.
I'd be shocked if this was not nominated for something with Emmys, with acting
Sure,
wise.
I mean, right now it has close to 100% on Rotten Tomatoes and 90 on Metacritic, which is, I think, the highest that we've seen, at least in my recent memory. And then, a lot of places were calling it essential viewing, one of the most important TV shows of the last, like, decade.
It could have so easily come across as boring, sluggish, or even pretentious
I
with
thought
this
it would.
dialogue.
When I first saw the cover of it, and I think just heard, like, the one sentence summary, I
Yeah.
was like, "Another one of these? Another accused? Another defending Jacob?
It's yeah.
Another 13 Reasons Why?" Like, just another, like, melodramatic what they didn't do was they didn't add music, and I was so happy
Yes.
about that.
Right.
Very, very rarely did
I
that
was
in
I was
movies.
gonna say there's a part in episode 4 where everything drowns out and you just
Right.
hear music, but it
But especially that psychology episode, it
right.
was just hold, and the idea of a conversation being able to hold that much legitimacy is something that I just like so gravitate towards in TV shows. And so had I known that that was what I was going to get, then I definitely would have tuned in.
And obviously it has experienced cinematographers and fluid camera movement, but I find it like I think that people are just tuning in because they want to see a one shot thing. You're gonna get so much more than that. It's about the had like great direction, great acting, great dialogue. I had a few nitpicks here and there. I felt like Luke Bascom in the second episode, as much as I liked his character, I didn't feel his backstory with his son was really that important or
It was
needed.
convenient that his son went there. Otherwise, he wouldn't have a lead. He would never have found out about
Yeah,
Katie.
I
No, no, no.
understand.
I'm saying like that's crazy. Like,
Right.
would they have had a different high schooler break it down for him? It would have been less. Like he would have listened less, maybe, and he wouldn't have approached them with the same tone. You know,
I understood that his son helped him with the case, but I felt like it was a little unneeded. But aside from everything here and there, like I said, kind of boring a little bit for the 40-minute mark. You're not going to get all your questions answered. I think that this is one of the best shows of the year, and we're only in March right now.
so what are you giving it?
I was going to say an 8.5, but 9 out of 10. I think the show deserves it.
Some interesting stuff is like they threw in some Easter eggs. The CCTV monitor, when they were playing the footage, it actually matches the actual runtime in the episode. Also, the series originally was supposed to be on Amazon Prime, believe it or not, and then Netflix got it. I don't know why Amazon Prime let it go. I do know that Stephen Graham and Jack Thorne decided that they did not want to go with trying to approach the Channel 4 or the BBC with this
Huh.
because they didn't think that they would get the right funding for it. And so they were kind of salty towards them, and they were like, we're not going to go
I
through that.
feel like going to Amazon Prime then going to Netflix, that definitely is like a step but like I would
Slip
prefer
through
that.
the Amazon Prime fingers. And then they threw in
I
a
did have one question to ask you though. In the first episode, did it remind you a lot of The Night Of, the pilot of The Night Of?
yes,
Because it's both the main characters, they're both being coached on kind of what to do,
right.
and then you get like the psychiatric checkup. Yeah, I thought I thought that was a connection as well.
Absolutely. Again, defending Kenny, defending Jacob, the night of any other recommendations or things that are at least some similar to it.
You know
I'd
what?
say Skins probably.
Yeah.
The way when they talked about the one shot takes and stuff, there were some serious moment in Skins where they didn't do music as well, and I was just like, oh, that might be a Stephen Graham thing.
Yeah, I just thought of it. You know what? Kind of the high school vibe, but something that's funny, Big Mouth. Maybe that's a good palate cleanser.
All right, Big Mouth. Yeah. Thanks for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. I wonder how Big Mouth does approach like toxic masculinity and stuff like that. I'm pretty sure it's done it.
Yeah. No,
Like
as
the hormone monster has been sort of that, but also fighting that. You know.
yeah.
All right. Thanks for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.
Bye.